I love having a vSphere lab to play with, but that's not today's topic. So I wanted to talk about the actual cost, the hidden costs of having a vSphere lab at home and as a hobbyist. So the question I had for myself, and I just wanted to make a quick video about it, have other people think about this, right? Should you be trying to license your vSphere lab or rebuild it every 60 days? As a hobbyist now, right? I'm a hobbyist. Now, this doesn't apply for apply to a person that is in the IT field, still young in their career, and need to add this to their resume. I think if you're in that position, certainly go ahead and pay for the subscription, have your servers running 24/7, whatever you need to learn the product. I'm all for that. But I'm a hobbyist now, right? So I'm trying to cut my costs because I'm looking at the costs of the VMUG subscription specifically and add in the cost of the electricity, and I'm wondering is it worth the cost as a hobbyist to keep it up and running, right? So where does this rebuild every 60 days come from? You can install Virtual Center and all the ESX hosts and evaluate it for 60 days. After that, it stops working and you have to rebuild. Now, you can avoid all that by doing a VMUG subscription, right? So here's some VMUG subscription numbers. $200 a year, 3 years for $510 at a discount. So it comes out to be about $16.60, 66 cents USD per month, or for the 3-year subscription, it comes out to 14.16 cents per month, right? And so that's a minimal cost if you're an IT person learning and trying to get into your career and add that to your resume. No big deal. This is just part of life. You need to upgrade your skill set, right, to get a better job, to move up the line at your workplace, or even to get a job, right? You want to be able to get that VMware certification. So I think it's a justified cost. But as a hobbyist, I'm not sure I want to pay $15 or $17 a month just to be able to license Virtual Center. And we have the electricity costs, right? So you see in my home lab, I like to use PCs, and I use the watt meter to capture the usage to figure out what is it using per day and how much would that equal out, right? So you go online on the internet and find a electricity usage calculator, right? In my area, I'm at 12 cents per kilowatt, and that comes out to be about, a little bit under $9 per PC for 100 watts 24/7. Okay, and that's for 1 month. That's the cost for 1 month per PC to run 24/7 using about 100 watts. Now you remember, your virtual infrastructure isn't going to be really doing a lot of stuff. I mean, unless you're doing some Bitcoin mining or something, it's going to use a lot more electricity than 100 watts. Right? But if it's just sitting there doing some minor things, maybe some Pi-hole, some DNS, or Plex server serving up media, or maybe music, right? It isn't going to use a lot of wattage because it's not using it 24 hours of the day, right? It's only while you're listening, while you're watching, or while you're using it. So 100 watts for a typical PC it's good. It's a good average to use of how much you might use for a lab. Remember, it's your lab. It's not your primary PC. You're not playing games in your lab, right? So there's no video cards in your PCs. There's no video cards in your servers, right? So it's using a minimal amount of power. Idle wattage is much lower than 100 watts, but I'm just using 100 as an average. Now, what's in your typical vSphere home lab? Well, you need one NAS for iSCSI or NFS shared storage, right? Because vCenter and vSphere, you need shared storage to be able to play around with some of the advanced features. You're going to need a standalone ESX server to host the Virtual Center Appliance. You can't really run it in the cluster because the VCSA has to come up online first prior to creating a cluster. So it's like the chicken before the egg, right? You have to have the cluster, you have to have the virtual appliance up and running before you can even create a cluster. So you can't just put that into the cluster. So you're going to need something, and that's a standalone host to create a place for the Virtual Center Server Appliance to live. Right? So once that's installed, then you can add up to 2 hosts. You can add more if you got, but this is the minimal. You need 2 to tango in a cluster, right? 1 node cluster does nothing. 2 nodes, then you can test VMotion, HA, DRS, etc., and a whole bunch of other stuff like distributed switches and such. So you need some hosts, you need some clusters. So here, the count here is 4. Right, and then if you want VSAN or to play around with VSAN, that's going to cost a lot more on your hardware. But you're going to need, I think, a minimum of 3 hosts in the cluster, so that will up the number to 5. But for my purposes, no VSAN, you're going to need 4 hosts. So here's the 4 total hosts to be online for vSphere Homelab. If you take the basic monthly cost that I calculated by measuring from the wall with a kilowatt meter, multiply that by the 4 hosts, you get, in where I'm located at 12 cents per kilowatt, you get a $35 a month bill. Or if you want to look at it at how much you're paying for the year for that cluster to be up, $420, assuming you only use 100 watts per node, right? And if it's not running a lot of stuff, you probably be at 420 or below if you're in the region at 12 cents per kilowatt, right? So that, again, it depends on where you live. But when you add in the VMUG subscription, because you need the licensing to keep it alive for 1 year, it's I mean, it's right here, $17 in addition, and it comes out to 51 and change or below, or $620 a year to keep that Homelab up and running. And then if you go with the 3-year for a small discount, it's a little under $50 a month, and $590 or less per year in costs. Not in the parts and the PCs or anything like that, just the electrical cost and the licensing cost. How can you lower that? Well, here's some ways to save money. Well, you would power on the lab only when needed to reduce electricity costs, right? So if it's not on, you're not using electricity, the minimal cost you will bear is the licensing cost, right? Which is $17 for the 1 year VMUG subscription. So you're going anywhere from $51 down to $17, anywhere in between there, if you power off your lab. If you purchase the 3-year, you save $250 a month, or about $30 a year. So you're at $49 down to $15, right? Somewhere in between there, depending if you turn on or turn off some of your components there of your 4 servers. So then you have to question whether VMUG is needed at all, right? I mean, it doesn't really save you all that much. It really is $17 or $15 a month, right? Is that really something you need? That's my question, right? If you're a home hobbyist, home labber hobbyist, do you need to have it running 24/7? And do you really need to have a license so that you don't have to rebuild it every 60 days? Why not rebuild it every 60 days or when needed? Say you don't touch it for a month, right? Or you let it expire, and then you don't really need to run anything or test anything for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Why pay that cost if you're not using it for that time? So that's why I question that, because I'm a hobbyist. I'm not going to be running this thing all the time. I'll just run it from time to time when I want to learn something new, right? Observations about the timings. Let's talk about that for a second. If you're in ESXi, if you install ESXi, the eval, the clock only moves when the server is powered on. So if you install ESXi in a server, then you shut it off, wait a month, and you boot it up. Well, the clock won't move. The timer will not be moving. It only moves when the server is up and running. So you might find yourself rebuilding the ESXi server less frequently than the VCSA, because the VCSA, the evaluation clock counts down regardless if it's on or off. So it's using the calendar. It knows when you turned it on, when you built it, and when you shut it off, and then you boot it back up. It checks and see how much time has passed, and it will, the evaluation will expire in 60 days. Right? It's happened to me, so I know it does that. But on my ESXi servers that I built, I turn them off, and I'm still running on the first install. Meanwhile, the VCSA has expired. So that's how I know that. Is there a benefit to rebuilding every 60 days? Well, you're definitely going to become an expert on how to install it, and an expert at basic configuration, because you're going to have to redo all that, right? I kind of roughly timed how long it might take me to do all that. To rebuild the ESX servers takes about 20 minutes each. If you have 3 of them, that's about an hour or so. You can rebuild all 3 ESX servers pretty quickly. As long as you do not swap the cables, take the cables all off, do not change any kind of mappings or zonings or port configurations. Leave everything alone, plugged in to the same place, and just rebuild your servers using the same IPs, the same NICs, the same everything. Put it down, write it down in notes, whatever you have to, so that and you'll be able to build all 3 of them within the hour. Okay, and then it'll take about an hour to reinstall the VCSA, and then another hour to reconfigure the most basic things in the VCSA, right? So such as recreating your cluster, recreating your virtual distributed switch. And then remapping the ports and re-adding the nodes and remapping the uplinks, just for the most basic of configuration. So that's about 3 hours to rebuild every 60 days, like clockwork. Because even if you have it shut off, VCSA is counting in the background. When you boot it up, it'll look at the calendar and it'll know how long it's been on, and you'll have your countdown. So you definitely become an expert at the basic configuration. Now, the downside is after 1 year of constant rebuilds, you're going to question your decision about your lab. Do I even need this lab? Or if I do need the lab, how often do I use it? And is it worth the $200 for the year? When you think about $200 in a year, yeah, that's not a lot of money. But once you start counting, $16 a month plus all the other things that you're subscribing to, right? Your TV, your internet, and all that. That $16 a month is just eating away at you, and it eats away at me for something that I don't really use. Why should I pay for something that I don't really use too much, right? So that's the whole reason for creating this video. Is do you need VMUG? Can you just rebuild every 60 days? Will it bother you? Right now, I'm on my second rebuild. So this is my my lab is now the second time I'm going through it and configuring things, and I'm trying to learn something before it expires. So this time I'm trying to learn how to use content libraries, right, to hold my ISOs for my images. If I can figure that out before I rebuild it, then great, I'll be happy. Then after I rebuild it for the 3rd time, I'm going to try to tackle another task. I don't know, maybe updates, how to use the lifecycle manager and create baselines and do updates. Maybe that'll be the next thing I do. So that's why I'm thinking, I don't really need to pay out $200. Maybe I'll just rebuild it, because it only takes 3 hours, and then it makes me an expert at installs and basic configuration. Maybe after 1 year of doing that, I would have a different opinion, and you'll see a new video and say, damn it, spend $200 and be done with it. For the year at least, right? I mean, it's a recurring cost. So if you pay for 3 year, right, that's a $510 cost. But from a yearly perspective, it's going to be, where do I put that number? Here. So from a yearly perspective, from a monthly perspective, it's $15 versus $17. And so that's the question. Do you use it enough to want to pay? And remember, this vSphere Homelab, if you're paying for that VMUG, again, if it's part of your career, I think that's fine. I think that you should do that. But when the whole reason for having a vSphere Homelab is you're testing out vSphere features. It's not to run other Homelab services that are not really VMware related products, right? I mean, if you're doing Docker, Pi-hole, DNS, Plex, any of those things that you see people running in their home lab, you don't need vSphere for that, right? You can run ESXi free, which I do, and my ESXi free server is #1. It's not even on this list because it's has the free license already added to it, and I don't want to jeopardize any of my core resources like DNS and Pi-hole, which everyone in the house depends on with my lab, because my lab's going to be torn down in 60 days or less. So you don't want your lab to be mingled with things that you need for your family and for your house and for what you would call in the business a production environment, right? You don't want to mingle those two together. All right, so that's what I wanted to create a video about, is just think about the cost. I mean, is this seem unreasonable for a year of using it? Do you really need your home lab on 24/7? Maybe of the 4 nodes that I mentioned, you know, the NAS might need to be on, right? The NAS might need to be on every 24/7. Maybe one standalone node could be on all the time, but the other, you know, the other nodes could be turned off. But you know, the standalone node, you're already running Virtual Center. You might not have enough resources after, you know, it depends on how much memory you have, how many CPUs you have. So that depends. Is it worthwhile running this node constantly? And if because your cluster nodes are offline and off, right? Maybe not, right? Why even bother running via your Virtual Center if your cluster nodes are offline? So the only thing you might want to leave on is just the NAS, so you can use the storage, you know, CIFS and whatnot for file sharing. But just that's the only one you would leave 24/7, while these 3 nodes here are turned off until you need to do something in your lab. So if they're turned off, you know, I mean, do you really need to pay this much money per year just to once in a while go play or something? Do you really need to pay this much to play with something? In my opinion, I don't think so. I'm going to try and rebuild my lab every 60 days and see how that goes. But and then again, this cost is with electricity, right? So maybe my cost will be just the cost of VMUG, right? It'll be $200 every year just to have the opportunity to play with it once in a while, right? That's more viable, I guess, right? More palatable about cost, especially with inflation, right? Everyone's getting hit hard at the wallet, so maybe that's why I made this video. But either way, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. Think about what you're doing and how much you're running and what your electricity bill looks like, and decide from there. All right, take care.